Okay, so today we are going to talk about the Ludwig Acrolite, the Supraphonic, and Preconceptions. Now these are both legendary drums in their own right, and they both have sort of a assumed sound characteristic that goes with each of them. The Acrolite, most people will tell you, is going to be a very neutral, dry, kind of gritty, maybe distorted sounding drum, whereas the Supraphonic is going to be more open, more airy, have more high end and crack to it. And that's always been my assumption, just because that's sort of what's commonly accepted. But when you really start thinking about it, they're really more similar than dissimilar in their build and construction. They're both pretty standard Ludwig builds. They both have aluminum shells with the center bead with sort of the round over edges. They both have triple flange hoops. Now they do have different lugs. The ones I've got here, I've got the bow tie lugs on the Acrolite and the imperial lugs on the Supraphonic. And the Supraphonic is a 10 lug drum, whereas the Acrolite is an 8 lug. And at the time, the 10 lug build was supposed to be more premium so that you could hold tension more easily. Nowadays, a lot more people are doing 8 lug builds for the idea that it opens up the drum more, which is actually kind of contrary to what we would assume between a Supraphonic and an Acrolite. The Acrolite has fewer lugs, so you would expect it to be more open following that logic. So kind of some funny business there. But really the big aesthetic difference is that we have the matte gray finish on the Acrolite and the chrome over aluminum or the chromed finish on the Supraphonic. And it's always been kind of my sneaking suspicion that people say that the Supraphonic is brighter and more open because it is literally a brighter looking drum, and that the Acrolite has a matted finish and that the Supraphonic has a chrome over brass finish. And now people might say, well, no, that is actually what gives it the tone. That, that reflective coating is going to bounce those sound waves so much more than the matted finish. But I will remind you that they are both the same finish on the inside. It's not chromed on the inside of the drum. So I don't really know how much weight that argument carries. So in any case, I've actually had both of these drums for a while now, but I never really compared them side by side. I've always kept my Acrolite in this room and the Supraphonic in my teaching room. And whenever I'd go back and forth between them, I always just sort of had it in my head like, yep, the Acrolite is drier and the Supraphonic has more smack to it. But I realized I'd never actually compared them fairly in the same room. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna pit them against each other, and we're going to see how similar or dissimilar they really are. Now, this right off the bat is not going to be a perfectly fair comparison because although I do have the same heads, top and bottom, I do have coated ambassador over hazy ambassador, the Supraphonic heads are pretty dead and old, and the Acrolite heads are a little bit newer, and I also have different snare wires on each one. So I'm going to get them pretty close tuning wise, but they're not going to be exact, and like I said, the heads, top and bottom, and the snares are not going to be exact as well. So if you want a perfectly fair comparison, you are more than welcome to send me some new sets of wires and some new fresh heads to put on the drums and really dial them in. But we're going to get them pretty darn close, and we're going to see how different they actually sound. Now, just so that it doesn't seem confusing, I'm actually going to use my other Acrolite for the test. I'm going to use the Black Galaxy version, or the Blackrolite, because this Acrolite I usually keep at a very specific tuning that is very low and dry, and then I put a bunch of tape all over it, and it works really well for like just a very flat, splatty snare sound, and I try not to change it. So I'm going to use the Black Galaxy version, which I promise you is exactly the same except for the exterior finish. So I'm just going to play them back and forth, and let's see what we find. Okay, so you can decide for yourself how different or similar you think those sounded. My subjective experience just playing them in the room and then listening back was that there is a difference, but it is not a big difference. And I think that the difference was well within the tolerance of the heads are different ages, and they both have different snare wires on them. So I wouldn't say by any stretch of the imagination that one is a better or worse sounding drum than the other. I think they are 95% in the same ballpark, and as far as their overall tone and characteristic, they are very, very similar drums. I think the Acrolite could get just as smacky as the Supraphonic, and the Supraphonic could get just as, you know, dead and dry sounding as the Acrolite. So I think when we talk about the characteristics between the Acrolite and the Supraphonic, that really we're kind of starting to split hairs, and that they are definitely more similar than dissimilar. Now, why is this information useful? Well, I think that the Ludwig snare sound, sort of the familial Ludwig's snare sound of the Black Beauty and the Acrolite and the Supraphonic, is one of my favorite snare sounds, and it's no wonder because it's a classic snare sound. For most people, that is the default of what a snare sounds like because it's been on so many pivotal records, whether it's the Supraphonic or the Acrolite or the Black Beauty. Those drums have just been all over music for decades, so it just sort of gets imprinted in our brains as the default snare sound. And I wouldn't say that it's any better or worse per se than any other snare sound, but it is definitely one that my brain and lots of people's brains and ears gravitate towards. So if you are looking to get a new drum, or if you want something that's reliable or a workhorse, or if you're looking to upgrade your snare, I think a vintage Acrolite or Supraphonic is almost always your best choice. And kind of what I wanted to determine in this test is, do you need to spend the extra money on the Supraphonic? Now, both of these are actually pretty affordable when you find a good deal and when you find them used. The Acrolites even more so. Now, Acrolites go from anywhere from 50 to 150 bucks on the used market, and then the Supraphonics go for somewhere between 150 and 300, just depending on how good of a deal you get. This Acrolite, actually my grandpa bought for me when I first started playing drums. He found it at a garage sale and had no idea what it was. I had no idea what it was. He brought it home. It came with the old Ludwig case and like some old Ludwig sticks in it. And it's like, oh, cool, thanks, Grandpa. And put it away in the closet for years. And then as I started to kind of learn more about drums and vintage drums, it's like, oh yeah, this Acrolite thing. And then it just hit me. I was like, wait a second. I went and looked up in the closet. Boom, here it was, this really great condition Acrolite that's been a mainstay in my collection for as long as I've had it. And then the Supraphonic I got for 150 bucks. It was just a good deal that someone had online. Same sort of thing with the Blackrolite that you heard. I saw that, I think, on Craigslist for 75 bucks, and I just grabbed it, even though I already had one. It's like, man, for 75 bucks, I'll have two Acrolites for sure. So they are relatively affordable, and I think if you see a good deal on either of these drums, if you see an Acrolite somewhere around 100 bucks, just don't think about it, grab it. And if you see a Supraphonic anywhere, 200 bucks and under, that's a pretty darn good deal too. This one, like I said, I got this one, I think for like 150 bucks, but it's pretty beat up, and that was a rare occasion. So anything under 200 bucks for a Supraphonic is a pretty good deal. But as we determined, they sound very similar, so I don't think there's anything wrong with just going for the Acrolite. So hopefully this was informative and helpful to some of you. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And if you have any comments, thoughts, or ideas on this topic, also feel free to comment below. You can subscribe to this channel if you like. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.